everyone, welcome back to a new video. Today I'm going to be sharing with you my top 5 favorite books that I read this year in 2022. I also have a few honorable mentions I would like to share. They did not make the cut for my top 5 favorites, but they're also really good in my opinion, so I just want to share those with you guys as well. Okay, so starting off with the first book, it is The Westing Game by Ellen Raskin. This was the first book that I read this year in 2022. This was a pretty short read. It's pretty thin, and it's also a middle grade book. So if you're looking for a pretty short book to read, I would recommend this book. Also, if you like the mystery genre, because this is a mystery book, and it's just really good. I had a fun time reading this one because I love mystery books. So in this book, Mr. Westing, he's this super rich man. He apparently gets murdered, and so in his will he invites people, his tenants that live in his apartment building, to his mansion, and then in his will he basically says that whoever solves this mystery of whoever murdered him gets his fortune. And apparently from the people that he invited, among them is the murderer, so they basically have to figure out who the murderer is in order to get that fortune. So yeah, it was super fun and interesting. I love trying to figure out who the murderer was. It's just super fun. The second book is Wild Card by Rachel Lee. So as I've mentioned before in my blind date with a book video, I mentioned how exciting it was reading this book, and I would say that even after reading the first chapter, the book overall was very exciting for me. When I read this, I felt like I was watching a TV show, because honestly every single chapter felt like an episode. So it was just, again, super exciting, super action-packed, a lot of drama. I will recommend for you to check out the trigger warnings. So if you don't like reading violence or anything regarding that, because there is some shooting that happens in this book. So yeah, just be sure to check out the trigger warnings. Again, this book, super exciting. If you like action and a little bit of mystery and stuff, and government conspiracies and all that stuff, you will enjoy this book. The third book in this list is The Manifesto on How to Be Interesting by Holly Bourne. This one is a very fast-paced book, so if you are trying to get out of a reading slump, this is probably something that I would recommend. And how I basically describe this book is if Read It and Weep and Mean Girls had a baby, this book would be it. So if you're into teen high school drama, you will enjoy this book. And I will also suggest for you to check out the content warnings and trigger warning, because there is some bullying in this book, and there's also an inappropriate relationship in this book. So if you don't want to read about that, check the content warnings out. And I believe there's also some drugs and drinking in this book, so again, if you're not into reading that stuff, then maybe this book isn't for you. But yeah, I really enjoyed this book. This one was definitely a page turner for me. I read this book in one sitting. Granted, it took me a few hours to read, but I literally could not put the book down because I just really needed to read the next chapter. Every time the chapter ends, it's just there's always a cliffhanger at the end of the chapter ish. It feels too short and you want to continue reading on to find out what happens next. So yeah, I just really enjoyed reading this. Okay, the fourth book in this list is Smaller and Smaller Circles by F.H. Batacan. I've recommended this book so many times already, so I'm not gonna say too much about it because I have talked about it in my first reading vlog, and I've also talked about it in my weekathon book reviews video. So if you haven't watched them, I will have it up here. Again, with this book, I recommend for you to check out the content warnings and trigger warnings. This one's definitely the darkest book that I've read. This one has some pedophilia in it. This one also has some pretty graphic descriptions of things. There's also a lot of blood and descriptive, pretty graphic, gory type stuff. But yeah, I enjoyed reading this because it was just super well written. It was so immersive, and I just really enjoyed the writing in this. I just thought the writing was really good. And then the last book in this top 5 list is House of Furies by Madeline Rue. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce their name, so I'm so sorry. I really enjoyed this book. It gave me a similar vibe to Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, because there are certain pages with some old photographs and stuff. That's pretty much the only similarity with Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. So what I liked about this book is that there's I don't know how to describe it. I don't know if it's supernatural things or mythological creatures and stuff, but I enjoy those type of things. I think they're super cool, even though they're a bit spooky, but it's the right kind of spooky for me, and it's just, I find it so fascinating. It's so cool to me. Things with the devil and fae and that whole kind of magical, mythological creatures and stuff, I just find it so cool and fascinating. So I really like that about this book. So yeah, I really enjoyed reading this book. This one's also pretty fast-paced, so this one didn't take me too long to read. So those are my top 5 favorite books that I read this year. I'm now going to be sharing with you the honorable mentions that unfortunately did not make the cut, but I thought were worth sharing anyway. So the first book is 1984 by George Orwell. This is the first time I've read this book before. I know it's a classic. So this book gives me the same feeling as I have with Lord of the Flies. I personally did not like the stuff that happens in the book, but I still enjoyed reading it. I just found it super interesting, and I could understand why this book was banned at some point in time. And again, I've mentioned this in my book wrap-up post on Instagram. Like, this book just like made me think about our current government and stuff. And I was also reminded of this book during the elections back in May. Things that were talked about in this book similarly happened in real life, especially the part about rewriting history. Like, that happened. Believe it or not, that actually happened here in the Philippines. Because of social media and stuff, people are now choosing to believe things that are not factually true. They'll just watch some TikTok or some YouTube video of some person relaying some information and like facts, even though they're completely false and mostly based on conspiracy and like bias. So yeah, like those things happened. I'm pretty sure it's probably still happening. And it's just so upsetting to see. Anyway, moving on. The next book that I would like to share with you is You Are Here by... I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, but it's Thich Nhat Hanh or Thich Nhat Hanh. I don't know how to pronounce his name. I'm so sorry. This one is more of a self-help book. This one is written by a Buddhist monk, a Zen monk, and it just basically teaches like Buddhist practices and some teachings. And yeah, I enjoyed reading it because there are some practices that I would also like to implement in my daily life, like meditation, thinking more mindfully, being present and grounded, and being grateful and all that stuff. So yeah, I really liked this book. It was a pretty nice, calming kind of read. So yeah. And then lastly, of the honorable mentions, it is George's Secret Key to the Universe by Lucy and Stephen Hawking. This book is a children's book, and it's like I was gonna say like a fantasy book, but it's also non-fiction. I think this book is a really good introduction to astronomy and like space and stuff. So yeah, I like this book. Even though this is a children's book, it's just a really lighthearted, fun book to read. And there's also some pages in this book with pictures from NASA and like some facts about them, about the planets, stars, asteroids, comets, and all that stuff. I don't really know what genre to call this book. It's like non-fiction, but like the story aspect of it is more like fantasy. But yeah, anyway, again, it's just a really fun, lighthearted book. So yeah. That is it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed watching. So if you've read any of the books I've mentioned today, let me know if you liked it or if you did not like them. Again, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!